In living as an ascended master among men, living these beautiful ascension attitudes, it is necessary that we know what to expect. Beloved ones, you don't need to eat. You may want to eat, and you may find that it is easier when you do eat to interact with others. You will sleep much, much less as you go into these more elevated states. There are also dramatic changes in the emotional states that you will be going through. Sometimes they will be very heightened, and sometimes they will actually be almost non-existent, depending on the phase that you're in during your progression. Don't worry about it. Just make sure that wherever you are, you know that this is no point of arrival, that life is a journey, it is not a camp. In living amongst men, they will not notice unless they are able to see refined light, or they are able, as more and more are, through cameras, to pick up this refined light that emanates from around you. But you see, it's easy to mistake masters that are not stuck. And let me explain what I mean by that. We are used to defining master as a very specific type of being. Generally, those masters have been over-gravitating into the bliss. They are the masters that are vastly, vastly expanded. Or they are the masters that tell you that which you already know in your heart. So let's take a look at this. When you are in ego identification, the masters that you generally go to are also in ego identification for the most part. You can go to other masters that are deeply in bliss. They give some hints as to how to live, but they generally don't even know how they got where they are. And they will speak about the truisms of life. They will speak about the beautiful things that we all know in our hearts to be true. These teachers are teachers of the known. To over-gravitate into the bliss is to over-gravitate or over-polarize into the known, which is light. When a master or a teacher, because a master, if you recall, is one who has the option of silencing the mind. When they teach, they are teaching that which makes our hearts go, yes, I know that. Yes, I should remember this. I know this already, but I don't live it, so I need to remember it, or make more of a concerted effort, or, nice way to present it. I know that love is needed for my fellow man, but yes, now I can see it a little clearer. They are teachers of the known. And especially once they disconnect from ego and go into the deep bliss, they are easily spotted. We know that those are masters. What is not easy to spot are those that make it beyond those phases, where one must go or stagnate. So as they make it beyond the stages, what they are delving into by the second phase of immortality, they need to start looking very, very closely, not at the known, not even at the unknown, but the unknowable. Now, we have made many video clips. You can go to our website and see where to find them. Many of them speak of the known and the unknowable. But essentially, the unknown is known to the rest of the cosmos. The known is known to man. The hidden realms can see far clearer than we can because their perspective is different. It's not that they are more elevated in consciousness. They have a different perspective. They could be more elevated, but it's not necessarily so. So they can see things that we can't. For us, what they can see is the unknown, but for them, it's again just the known. When the unknowable comes into the known, growth happens for every single solitary being. This is the glorious destiny of an ascended master, that they bring in what has never before been known. And as they do, the entire cosmos raises up just a small notch, if that's what it is. But everything grows. That's the unknowable. Masters that deal with the unknowable do not sit in the poise and the bliss. They live in poise, but it's hard to spot, because the poise is lived with compressed time. Now, to understand that, moments before an accident happens, we find that they're like minutes long. They don't feel like moments. The reason is that we are that fully aware and attentive to every little detail as the accident is about to happen. We buckle up the baby, we move the heavy object that might fly through the car upon impact, we brace the children, we tell so-and-so to get their head down in the car, but we do it all, and it seems like minutes long when it was but a few moments. This is living in compressed time. To somebody witnessing this, it would seem as though life is very chaotic, as if you're flurrying around and scurrying around, but to you time has slowed down, and so it is not so. Ascended masters live in compressed time, so it could seem to another that they are in constant activity and motion when they're working. Of course, a master lives in balance, so they are balancing doingness and beingness. In the second big stage, or if someone is stuck in the bliss, they only want to be in the beingness, not in doingness. So there is not the proper pulsation to provide them the energy for further growth. So the ascended master, however, balances doingness and receptiveness or rest, the inner life with the outer life. And so they once again might walk among men, peddling their fish in the market, doing their work in the dentist's office, whatever it is that they do. Why would they? Because this is where they find the unknowable. It is in the midst of humanity, which is the densest being in creation, where the unknowable and the known meets. Think of a light bulb, and think of a room around the light bulb. We are as far away from the light bulb as we can come in terms of density. To go any further, you have to leave the room. Exactly my point that I'm trying to make. If you leave the room, even for a moment, you are delving into the unknowable. It is in physicality where the true unknown is accessed and turned into the known through experience. Thus, the ascended master knows never to withdraw from experience. And so they delve back into life, and they push life to the edge, because they want to see further than it has ever seen before, by any being, anywhere. And thus the master that is in full-blown ascension, and not resting on his or her laurels, are delving into the unknowable, whereas we are used to identifying masters as those who are overpolarized, perhaps, into the known. We want to see a master in sedateness, in sereneness, in poise. But a master knows how to compress time. And they can do 10 things for every 2 things that somebody in identity consciousness can do. And they do, because to them it seems like a peaceful pace. So very easily missed masters that are in ascension. Those who have at some times gained immortality and chosen not to go to the ascended mastery realms, which until recently was quite rare, but there are a few, would move from village to village to village, whether they're in China. Several Taoist immortal masters that I've encountered are ancient, or in India. They're taken for granted. Oh, those are the masters. They don't die. Or they could move from town to town. There is a beautiful piece of writing which is in the Apocrypha. And the Apocrypha, my beloved brothers and sisters, are the books of the Bible that have been thrown out by the old Catholics, masters or priests that did the selection of which books were worthy of going into what today is assembled as the Bible. Some beautiful scriptures were tossed out on their ear, and one such one is the Odes of Solomon. Another one that is very beautiful and speaks of the ascension process that someone is going through is Esdras. I believe it is spelled Esdras. But the Odes of Solomon, he speaks of himself becoming an ascended master, and he says, "I had the form and fashion of a strange person, and all who saw me were amazed." Well, the reason they were amazed is because he didn't age. He stayed youthful and young in his body and his face, and everybody around him aged. It's a very strange feeling, and that is what he is describing. And he said, "My prison bars melted before me, and lo, I was the door of everything." The prison bars that melted before him is human limitations, mortal boundaries. Because as the belief systems are discarded, as you no longer believe that you have to burn in fire, for example, as we mentioned earlier on, then you don't. And so miracles abound. Because as the belief systems go, so do the mortal boundaries. So do the can'ts. And all of a sudden you find that life is full of cans. And so these prison bars that he is speaking of, they're the belief systems. And nothing appeared closed before me means, in fact, that he is entering a state in which miracles are commonplace. When we work in my classes together, in the beginning of the week, we go, "Isn't this amazing? Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it fantastic?" And every week for me is higher than any week I've ever lived with students before. And yet by the end of the week, we have forgotten that we are in this cocoon in which miracles have become commonplace. This is the way in which a master lives in the flesh. So let us take a look at what it takes to disconnect from belief systems. If we disconnect from belief systems, we become free from the human grid. And this is the way a master should live. To become free from the human grid, initially, when masters are in God consciousness, they interact sparingly, as we have mentioned, because they do not want to be pulled back into the games, nor do they want to have their energy leaked. And they also are familiar with the phenomenon that does happen to ascended masters in the flesh. People are more familiar with sensing fear in others. When they sense instead the love, could be felt as an irritation. It could be felt as something that makes them uncomfortable, something they wish to withdraw from. Because love flushes up all the parts of someone else that they do not themselves love. If we are in the state of ascended mastery where we are in the total silence of the mind, the love floods our heart. We become unpredictable because we live from this love-based place of heart. We live a path with heart, as the Toltecs call it. As we live a path with heart, we start to dance to a different drummer. We dance to our own music, and he who cannot hear that music thinks that the dancer is mad. And I'm quoting now the Sufi philosopher Rumi. It is the case. We no longer are dancing according to social conditioning. We are dancing according to the dictates of our heart, who is receiving potential directly from Source. And so we become a strange person, as the master who wrote the Odes of Solomon is speaking about. If we take a look at how these perceptions form, they form very early in life, because the baby realizes that to do one action doesn't make mommy and daddy smile. To do another action makes them go, ooh, clever baby, and they all smile, and everybody feels very happy, and warm, fuzzy feelings surround the baby. And so from the very beginning, when their assemblage point is able to freely move, that point becomes more and more fixed by programmed behavior. And the programming comes from the parents, and so the baby starts to have a more fixed assemblage point, and unfortunately stop seeing into the other dimensions, stop seeing the hidden realms and all the beings around us. As the child grows older, there is punishment for stepping too far out of the box. There is approval for staying within the belief systems of the parents. The apartheid-driven South Africa that I encountered in youth was so programmed that one could not see another without fear if they had a different color. Or you couldn't see another without hate because they were the oppressors. It was very difficult to overcome these social conditioned responses to our fellow man. But South Africa is well on its way to doing just that. I have recently visited there to teach, and great strides are being made in integrating and creating friendships amongst all races. The programming we received is based on punishment or reward. In the tribe that our parents are in, there are those assets that are valued and those that are not. Unfortunately, in most of our Western societies, we are valued by our doingness, not our beingness. And so slowly but surely, the child gets programmed out of valuing the non-cognitive, the magical, the exquisite beauty of the unseen realms, the whisperings of spirit, into a left-brain-dominated society that values action over non-cognitive receptiveness. This is one of the ways that the child becomes left-brain oriented. Another way in which that programming takes place is that the child says, "Mommy, there is a fairy on my lunch bucket." And Mommy says, "Look, it's time for you to start telling the truth. But Mommy, I see a fairy on my lunch bucket." And the mommy gets very upset and says, "Now, if you don't stop lying, I'm going to have to tell your father, and we're going to have to enforce some punishment." Because the mother is thinking that the child will make a fool of themselves. I recently had a parent come to me, and they were very concerned. The mother was very highly educated and in the judicial system. In fact, she was a judge. And she came to me and said, "I'm so concerned. My child is such a liar." And she said she keeps seeing fairies and talking to them. And she sees this and that and the other. And I went and fetched my book called Arubafirina, Book of Fairy Magic. And this book has a photograph of a fairy right in front of my face, about the size of a tennis ball. Completely unenhanced, authentic photographs taken interdimensionally. I showed this to the mother, and she was silent for the longest time. And then she said to me, when my mother was in advanced stages of dementia, she was a very intelligent woman at one point. But the doctor was sitting there speaking to me as though my mother wasn't in the room, and telling me how advanced her dementia was. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, she spoke up, and she said, "Perhaps the reality I have entered is not your reality, but to me it is real." In other words, we are being programmed to look at a certain reality as real and another as unreal. If it is fabricated, of course it is unreal. But if, for some reason, our assemblage points have shifted, or in not seeing life at face value anymore because of a dementia, we can see interdimensionally. It cannot be totally dismissed as fabricated. In this way, slowly, the unseen realms are being programmed out of the child. The master, once again, becomes like the child. For like the child, they live with innocence. Innocence is the result of living in the moment. Thoughts pull us out of the moment into the next or the one before. And as we have said, they are the result of resistance to life. Our innocence is found in the moment. The master lives in eternal time with full attention to the moment. Let's run with this idea of the resistance to life, because it is the primary cause that keeps us in ego identification. If one looks at black magic, what is black magic? The enforcing of one's will on reality. If you look at white magic, if it is from the correct source, it is in fact the revealing of the perfection that underlies appearances, an entirely different dynamic. Whenever black magic in the past has been practiced upon the planet, a planetary axis shift takes place. The planet's axis shift that has currently happened, in other words, it's not exactly straight up and down as upon its axis with true north and south. There's a slight tilt. It tells us in the book, The Gift of the Unicorns, the second half of this book speaks of the history of the cycles, and it speaks about how these shifts happened. In one instance, it was a gradual shift. It happened little bit by little bit. But in other instances, there was a more severe shift, and then there was a great loss of life. The meridian of the earth is straight up and down, and it shifts due to imposing will upon life versus the full cooperation with life that is the hallmark of mastery. What has this got to do with us? Well, it has to do with why aging occurs, why energy is lost, why death occurs, and why people are, in fact, causing their own demise through their resistance to life. When a being is born, the meridian of their body runs like a figure 8 vertically, crossing over in the life force center, which we mentioned has moved up to the heart center. The life force center is the crossover point for a vertical figure 8. As we start to oppose life, this vertical figure 8 starts to tilt, because opposing life to someone that has studied the Toltec traditions is a form of black magic. It is a form of imposing your will on life. We anticipate the future instead of allowing the future to come to us. We try and enforce our will fearing that we have been left alone to fend for ourselves, not realizing that we are part of the great interconnectedness of all life, that we can never be alone, that every being dwells within our true identity as a unique perspective superimposed over all that is. And so, as we oppose life, this tilts, and we end up with a horizontal figure 8 called the zavuya. And this word, the zavuya, is the loop of time. The reason is, as this meridian tilts, whereas as a child we start off living in the moment, we end up creating for ourselves linear time. True linear time no longer exists, because as we have seen, awareness no longer moves. Linear time was the movement of awareness across the space of the cosmos. That is what linear time was. And now it doesn't move any longer. Linear time as a reality doesn't exist, but we can create for ourselves within our bodies linear time that we live, and it will manifest as tension in the body. That tension releases when we live in eternal time. So when we live in linear time, we have the time loop that the ancient Maya, and I think Arguelles was the one who wrote about this, Surfers of the Zavuya, I think he wrote about. They wrote about time a lot, but what they didn't realize is what they were writing about was the lowest levels of consciousness we can be in, which was ego identification. The Zavuya is not supposed to be horizontal through the belly button, or as it was, and then later through the heart. That is the result of resisting life. As we go into these later stages, the meridian is now vertical again, and we start to live in full awareness to the now, meaning we're living in the power of the moment. If we take a look further at this resistance to life that we bring about, in doing so, we usually live only from some chakras. Other chakras where trauma has occurred, or where programming has said, do not live out this chakra fully, we suppress. Let's look at an example of that. If you take a flower and you cut the flower's stem, immediately its life force spills out to the bottom. The ancient Druids knew this, and when they picked their herbs, or when they picked their food and their vegetables, they immediately laid it within a pan of water that they carried with themselves, or they put it on fabric that was lined inside, or straw, inside a basket. They were hoping to alleviate the loss of energy and life force from the plant so that it could be cooked into the plant and ingested by them. We are like the flower that is cut when we are cut in our meridians. The root chakra. The minute a baby is born, programming takes place for about 5 minutes. It is imperative that only those with high consciousness handle a baby for the first 5 minutes of its life. If the nurse holding the bottom of the baby has problems or of shame, for example, with her own root chakra, this can be programmed into that baby. When a baby dolphin is born, for the first few moments of its life, all the other dolphins come around it, touching it with different parts of their body, programming it into it the highest wisdom that they carry. In this way, it is hoped that the generations grow in wisdom and in knowledge, one to the other. But as we touch the baby being unconscious, the baby gets those things programmed into it. So the root chakra could bear shame from birth. If we are experimenting with genitals, and this usually happens around the age of 5. And we are caught by a mother or a father, and it is not kindly dealt with. Shame develops around feeling in the genital area. Later, we can deny feelings during sex, or we can search for the feelings during sex because we don't properly feel them, and so become overactive during sex. All of these things are indicative that there is a plug that forms in the chakras of a life that has not fully yielded its insights, and therefore a life that has not fully had its overcomings. It is therefore necessary for us to look at these areas of our lives. The second chakra, the chakra in which fear can lodge. In the second chakra, if we do not understand that to fear another is to fear ourselves, that to fear anything else is like madness, for we are truly the center of our existence, and all that we feel and dream and see within ourselves we throw out upon the canvas around us. As Shakespeare said, I, your looking glass, shall be, and will reveal to you things which you yourself know not of. And the wonderful James Allen, philosopher, in his little book, As a Man Thinketh, says environment is but a looking glass. What is within will surely manifest without. And for us to fear what is without is to deny that which is within. If we change that which is within, it will immediately change that which is without. Say now.